I want to welcome you all to the first session of our workplace violence prevention series here, brought to you by the Workforce Risk Management team here at Sikich. I'm Lisa Mitchell. I'm here with my colleague, Matt Doherty. And we first just want to welcome you all for joining us today. As we said, this is session one, and this is Workplace Violence Prevention 101, understanding what workplace violence prevention is and why it matters. And again, this is session one. There's 4 parts to this series. We hope you'll join us for all of them. But we have people joining us today from a variety of industries, agencies, and geographies. And I just want to commend each of you for taking time and putting this session, blocking your time, showing up, dedicating your efforts towards really learning best practices around workplace violence prevention and how you can create a safer, more resilient workplace for your organization. So thank you all for investing your time and energy here with us today. We know it will be worthwhile for you. So before we get started and I hand things over to Matt, there are just a few housekeeping items for you that I want to cover. We'll give you a minute here to take a look at the legal disclaimer, but I want to let you know a couple of features here in GoToWebinar that we'd like you to utilize throughout this session here. So first of all, if you have questions, there is a box with a question mark in it. You can put your questions in there. We have our team assisting us here to field any of those questions. We plan to allow a few minutes at the end of the session to address those specific questions. So if you don't hear your question addressed right away, know that we have plans to get to it at the end of the session if time allows. And if not, we'll be following up with you specifically to make sure that you get your answers. Secondly, there is an icon that has a paperclip attachment on it. That is where you can find the slides from today's presentations, as well as a handout that is being given to you as additional reference material to help you reinforce and use what we're covering here in today's session. For those of you that would like to receive your CPE and HRCI credits for today's session, there's a couple of things that you need to do. So we all know that getting those CPEs requires continual engagement. So we're going to have a series of poll questions throughout the presentation. You will need to respond to all 3 of those poll questions in order to qualify for those CPE credits and HRCI credits, as well as completing a brief survey at the conclusion of this session today. So you got to answer all 3 poll questions. They're not hard, I promise. And then make sure that you stick around for the post-session survey. Those are the requirements in order for us to get you those credits. And those certificates will be sent to you at the email that you registered at in about 2 to 3 weeks. So you'll see those come through for documentation and submission purposes. So I think that is it for housekeeping. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our expert facilitator today, Matt. Matt, go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself, and it's all yours.
Sure, Lisa, thank you. Matt Doherty, our team has been running workforce risk management for well over 15 years now. In my prior life, I was the agent in charge of the Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, teaching law enforcement preventive threat assessment, much different than a criminal investigation. But Lisa and our team, we develop workplace violence prevention policies, programs, conduct award-winning training, as well as work very serious cases, which throughout today and tomorrow, you'll hear some of our cases that we work where we've applied a lot of our principles in workplace violence prevention. As you can see by the agenda, there's a lot going on, and even for those in our audience who are developing policies, and we're not questioning the fact that there's probably a lot of experience with our attendees, but a lot has been changing over the years, over the matter of weeks in legislative trends. So we're going to go over some of what we know today, and it's ever evolving. So we're very excited to have you today to talk about these very important critical steps on workplace violence prevention. So our first poll question, how would you describe your organization's current approach to workplace violence prevention? Do you have a policy? Are you just starting to build the program? You have a policy, and we've seen this with a variety of our clients at different stages of development. We've gone from small companies to very large companies, companies that have no programs, to actually companies that have very robust programs, but due to attrition, et cetera, need some training.
Give you about 30 more seconds to get your votes in. Again, you do need to participate in each poll to be able to receive your credit. So we want to make sure everybody has a chance to contribute to this really interesting output here that we're seeing come through. All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds. Looks like everybody's jumping in here. Thank you so much for that. All right, polls ended. Matt, what do you think?
In a way, Lisa thinks I'm not surprised. It runs the gamut, and that's typically our client base. Some have a formal policy and program, but they need training due to new hires or attrition. Um, Others are just starting to build a program, and there's a huge difference, as you'll find out, between policies and programs. No formalized process. Plans look great on paper, but how do you implement that process? And then some people have a program, but due to the ever-changing environment and landscape, there's room for improvement. And there's always room for improvement. Uh, and again, some people have a well-integrated program, not surprising. And that's when training and expert lectures come in handy for that, because it really is a best practice to constantly stay attuned to what your program's all about, rather than collecting dust and just waiting for an incident to happen. So I'm not surprised, Lisa, about any of this.
Yeah, pretty standard findings there. Thanks for participating. One down.
Yeah. A lot of our clients, it depends where the particular client resides, whether it be in HR or legal, and or security or facilities management. But a lot of what we kind of hang our hat on is the fact that OSHA does have that duty of care requirement. Uh, they have to maintain a place of employment, and that really resonates. Oftentimes, it should resonate across the C-suite and leadership, but it oftentimes resonates with legal. There is a legal requirement, there's litigation involved. We'll talk about some of our expert testimonies. And then also SHRM. We follow SHRM standards, Society of Human Resource Management. This is not just a security director exercise or a legal mandate. You really have to follow HR standards. Whenever you're talking about policies and programs, I think our audience would agree, the gatekeeper is the director of HR. You can't change policies or programs, implement training without that approval. So it's very important to follow the leadership of SHRM in regards to that. And there's a lot of work to do that they acknowledge. And those are the really the standards that we follow for this. So there are alarming statistics, and we'll be talking about statistics because it's not going away. Just look at this: 2 million victims of workplace violence a year, 68%. We're going to explain why they don't feel safe at work. And half of companies have experienced one incident of workplace violence. Um, and there are a fourth of workplace violence incidents never formally reported by American employers. And we're going to get to the bottom of that in the next couple of days to talk about what are the obstructions or the impediments to information sharing. Why aren't people reporting these incidents? So our practice area, we've supported over the years different public and private sector entities, and I think a good example is the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense, we designed insider threat programs and graphic novels and supporting all of their efforts for insider threat. And around 2018, 2019, the trend we're starting to see is that workplace violence, as mentioned in the Defense Authorization Act, funding the entire Department of Defense, they categorize workplace violence as a subset or a dotted line to insider threat. And we'll talk about that and look at the expansion of workplace violence. We're getting away from that mythology that workplace violence is that image of worker to worker, although that occurs and that is a category, but it's beyond that. It's theft or sabotage, espionage or cyber, and violence is a subset of that insider threat. Talking about life stressors for the next couple of days, the motivations, capability, and intent to carry out an act of workplace violence could easily result in other forms of insider threat, such as sabotage or theft, espionage. So it really has been expanded rather than just a physical fight or a threat on coworker to coworker. So the definition has really been expanded over the years. If we focus on acts of extreme violence or impending extreme violence, then we risk being too late and of losing our opportunity to prevent harm. In other words, how many times have you seen in the media an incident took place and other employees were already concerned about the situation that they're in? And our options are limited. They can become limited at that point to run, hide, or fight, that typical active assailant response to these things. And no one wants to end up there, including police department response. Counterproductive work behavior refers to intentional acts by employees in a way that it harms the organization and its ability to be productive. All of these, if you look at this, are a managerial best practice anyway. So to increase morale, to help get good reviews on Indeed and Glassdoor, to make it a good place to work, you need to address these issues anyway. And one of our colleagues came up with the term, think about the troubled and the troubling. Think about the troubled employee, contractor, visitor, family member, enveloping in the workplace, and the troubling behavior associated with that. That's what we're talking about. These are all troubling behaviors that, if left unchecked, it could potentially lead, and that's what we're going to further talk about today. As I said, we're getting away from that mythology that it's just worker on worker violence. The Department of Labor, NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, have talked about these different categories of people who potentially could commit these acts of workplace violence. And in the next few slides, I'll explain to you each one why it is significant and has an impact on workplace violence. So the first type, and again, these are types categorized by the Department of Labor. We're going to talk about California Occupational Safety and Health. We're going to talk about National Federal Occupational Safety and Health. They're all conforming to this definition of what type of person is committing or potentially committing these acts of violence. The first one is really what I call, in my Secret Service experience, coming off the street. Someone who has no business at the work site, no legitimate business, violent acts. This could be a mugging in a parking lot. This could be a robbery at a retail location. And they approach workers with the intent to commit a crime. And there's a variety of preventive measures that we've done in response or to prevent that criminal intent. Physical and technical security measures. Physical, technical, and security assessments that we've conducted have put receptionists in a much safer area, for instance. Installing man traps where you have multiple layers before you get in. Employer safety policies to make the workplace safer. Employee training and active assailants response training. Many of you consider it active shooter response training. Just as a little side note, we call it active assailant because there's this mythology about active shooter that it's somebody with a long gun. An assailant has a variety of different topics or weapons that they can use. Most are done with handguns. Some are done with knives. So we have changed and evolved to calling it from active shooter to active assailant response team training. That's all preventive measures that deal with that first category, criminal intent. So the customer client, this is another one. These acts most often occur as workers are performing their normal tasks in front of a client or customer, even on another job site. And so some of the preventive measures, when we're talking about this category of customer client, de-escalation techniques. Some of you, many of you have that experience where you've seen a client or a customer that's difficult to deal with and is escalating. So one of the preventive measures is de-escalation techniques. How do we take it down a notch? How do we prevent from escalating into an act of workplace violence? And if anybody has concerns about this potential at the client site, the same policies and procedures should apply. And that includes us at Sikich. We do phenomenal work across the world on client sites, and they could be the most valuable client or customer that we have. But we want to make sure that our employees are in a safe environment, even if they're in a remote site on a client site or event. Our policies apply to the same environment, and so that's why these acts often occur as workers are performing their normal tasks in front of customers and clients. So that's type 2. We'll go on to type 3. Worker to worker, the classic definition. And preventive measures, again, de-escalation and conflict resolution techniques, recognizing and reporting potential warning signs. Um, we have a partnership with the former chief of Aurora, Illinois Police Department. And when she was the chief, very well renowned, and she has helped us co-present and done part of our training. In her district was the Henry Pratt company, um, um, very robust company. And in February of 2019, I was interviewed extensively in the media on this case where 5 people were killed, plus the perpetrator who was an employee. And the employee was ripe with warning signs. He had restraining orders. He was in possession of a gun firearms permit when he shouldn't have been. He's had felony convictions, 2 domestic violence charges, and he was going to be dismissed and fired for disruptive behavior, performance issues, etc. And he was called into HR, and he killed the HR person and an HR intern on their first day on the job. And the person was ripe with warning signs. Now, this isn't meant to be directing any time of vitriol towards the Henry Pratt Company, but these are lessons learned that warning signs were not observed, were often observed. For instance, he joked to a coworker, "I'm going to blow the place up." Allegedly, some of the coworkers knew he was in possession of weapons. All those things were not reported. The coworkers thought he was just joking. Really tragic consequences of work on worker if we don't recognize those warning signs and teach de-escalation and conflict resolution techniques. Just one of many examples that we have. Personal relationships, extremely important when it comes to, and what comes foremost to my mind is domestic violence. We're very thrilled and privileged to have one of our partners, her foremost expert herself in domestic violence. She'll be speaking in the second session today. But the Department of Labor, OSHA, all these entities have now added personal relationships. When you hear that 40% of women killed in the workplace are killed by an intimate partner, it's of epidemic proportions. And there are preventive measures, domestic support, providing physical procedures, enterprise-wide training, and really encouraging reporting. And I have to stop for a minute. Very compelling case study that we have. We implemented policies and programs at a very large insurance company relatively recently, about 2 years ago. And we talked about you should voluntarily have, if you have a restraining order or protective order, bring it forward. And there are anti-discrimination laws that protect domestic abuse victims. They're entitled to court dates. You can't deny them a promotion. All of those statewide. I can't think of a state that doesn't have those anti-discrimination policies. And we use it to encourage reporting. Well, during the break, had a young woman approach us with the office manager, and she said, "I have a restraining order." She was an employee for about 5 years, well-regarded employee. She was in her 20s. And I said, "What's the restraining order?" And she said, "Well, I've been an employee here for 5 years. I love working here. But in the last 2 years, I've had a restraining order." And the restraining order, I asked her who it was. She said, "I went on a blind date. It's the worst mistake I ever made. My parents are too old to live with. I have to live with my brother and his wife." And you could just tell she's in constant state of fear, reluctant to report it, didn't want people to reflect bad judgment on her. All of those issues on this really sensitive issue of domestic violence. But what we did was we established protective panic alarms around the reception area. We made sure the local police knew, because police really do have a challenge with sharing restraining orders and mental health commitments across jurisdictional lines. And because of this training, she came forward, had the courage. I'm very happy to say that this person was arrested for other bad things. She is still there today. And about 6 months ago, we were informed she was promoted. And morale went up. Other people of her gender, other people of similar demographics, started giving good reviews on job sites because they knew this is a company that really cares about you and didn't hold it against you. So really that personal relationship is just critical, and that's why you're going to hear about this more than once in the next couple of days. So there are greater risks. It can happen anywhere to anyone, as evidenced by the two stories I shared with you, the domestic violence case that we experienced, and our partner in training, the former chief of Aurora. Um, they could happen anywhere, anytime, with anybody. And look at all these risks for incidents. And so, really, if you have, chances are, the vast majority, if not all, of our attendees here are experiencing this type of situation and setting in their workplace for their employees. So, there are warning signs. And think about this. This is typically it's referred to. I'm a member of the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, as our entire team is, and there are best practices, and it's referred to a variety of terms: pathway to violence or escalating behaviors. And really, where a typical workforce should recognize these warning signs and sudden changes in frequency and pattern, noticeably unstable and emotional. And I'm not talking about somebody that's having a bad day on a Monday morning, as we've all been guilty of that, or having a long weekend and maybe not looking our best on Monday morning for work. That's just a natural human occurrence. But with frequency and intensity, and what we want to do is the programs, the policies, the training, we really want to be in that concerning area. Every uh, every job site will have concerning behaviors, but if they aren't recognized, they potentially could escalate. And we need that early intervention so that it doesn't go into early warning signs or warning signs. Again, how many times have you seen in the media, I knew it was that employee all along, but nobody did anything about it? These are managerial best practices anyway. So when we talk about risk factors, what can trigger a violent episode? And keep in mind what can trigger an insider threat as a result of cyber, the results in cyber or theft. They can go either way. But it's very important points for HR and managers and coworkers to be alert to, along with warning signs. May trigger a violent episode, job layoffs, or threats of job elimination. Um, all of these, as a matter of fact, is a point of best practice now. If I called the local police because I had a concern about a job layoff or a threats of job elimination, rifts, if you called the police, generally speaking, don't want to label any particular police department, but if you called the police department 15, 20 years ago, and you said you had job layoffs on people that had concerning behaviors, a high likelihood they wouldn't get involved. That's an HR matter, call us when a crime's been committed. But now the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Chiefs of Police have not mandated, but highly recommended, if you get called by a public sector company or a private sector and there's upcoming layoffs, you should get involved, provide assistance. There's a term for it. It's called standbys. Many times we've had to call on behalf of our clients, local police. Can we do a standby? You'd much rather have them involved, running the person's record, having them a cell phone call away, et cetera. So that's just one example of all of these risk factors that clearly have been documented by many after action reports on incidents. And look at that domestic abuse and spousal abuse that occurs in the workplace. So we were thrilled to see this back in September. A law was passed based on a shooting that took place in San Jose, California. And as I said, SHRM, OSHA, they've put out standards, they put out guidelines. Different entities have recommended best practices. But for the first time, there was a law implemented, 10 or more employees. And the reason I say San Jose, when that shooting first took place, myself and the CEO of Sikich, Chris Geyer, we were quoted extensively in the San Jose media regarding that there's a high likelihood when this person killed 9 people, he was an employee, ripe with warning signs. As a matter of fact, it was so significant that we are currently, our practice area is providing expert testimony in one of the litigations in that case. Many people knew this person was a problem. Allegedly, they referred to him as the next active shooter, some of the employees. So it's really a model legislation. We've picked up several clients implementing workplace violence prevention programs to be compliant with California OSHA. And in our experience, California is really progressive and other folks will follow. As we walk through the other state examples, keep in mind how this legislation is now setting a precedent across the nation. And just one of the many examples, these are just a couple of examples showing that growing focus on industry specific protections, whether it be retail, healthcare, the Retail Worker Safety Act in New York. With grocery retailers coming out of the pandemic, they've noticed a 63% increase in attacks, workplace attacks on grocers. And so they realize this is getting out of hand. We need to have this de-escalation training, put panic alarms, non-retaliation. We need to protect those folks. Texas, it's just amazing. Emergency healthcare workers in the healthcare industry, whether it be nurses, they are 4 times more likely to experience violence in Texas than any other job hazard. That includes police officers. It's just astounding. All of those relatives coming in for emergency treatment, the issues that we have on the border, all of that. And some laws are in effect, and they have been very, very effective. Ohio, the same thing. They recognize that healthcare workers are really at risk. And each of these legislations for workplace violence, it's no longer optional in these states. You have to have a program that are compliant. We're thrilled to see that because we've been doing this for well over 15 years. Look at all the legislation, the trends that are taking place. All of this, while states are pushing forward, federal action has stalled. Many organizations are now treating state laws as the de facto standard, and we're seeing that. We're not going to be surprised if OSHA adapts California OSHA requirements for this. Oftentimes, our clients that are in California maybe have a footprint in California, but are headquartered elsewhere, or they have other footprints. Our advice to them is when they ask us, should I just apply this to the California employees? No, it's really a best practice. So, and get ready. We think it's highly likely that OSHA will adapt these. And why not? Why wouldn't you adapt a best practice legal requirement from California into all your geographic locations? So, legislation is evolving fast, and what's optional today may be mandatory tomorrow, even if your state isn't there yet. Now's the time to act, to start taking a look at your policies. Before you have a tragedy, your most important asset, your people, but also the liability issues of not being in compliance. And again, it's not just about compliance, it's about protecting your most important asset, your people, your operations, your reputation. When we talk about reputational damage, we'll talk about a couple of cases that very hard to recover from when you've experienced an act of workplace violence, unless you've had some sound policies in place. So Lisa, here's our poll question.
Right. So this is the second of 3 poll questions that you're going to be asked to complete today in order to receive those credits that we're looking for. What is your organization's top motivator for investing in workplace violence prevention? And you can select more than one on this one, so it's kind of a choose your own adventure. We'll leave this up for about another 30 seconds. It looks like votes are coming in pretty fast and furious here, but looking to really understand better from those of you in attendance here, what's really driving the push behind, or is there a push behind workplace violence prevention measures at your organization or agency? We'll wrap voting up in about 10 more seconds here. It looks like most of our answers are in. I'm liking the overwhelming weight here of protecting people and doing what's right. That's encouraging. All right, the poll has ended. Matt, what do you
Yeah.
think about this recent round here?
Well, I'm thrilled. That altruistic value of your people are your most important asset. To see that's the prime motivator. But again, people's budgets are, whether it be in risk or in security, they can be limited. So we're still thrilled to see that legislation come out, because it really can help you use it as a hammer as the different departments are grabbing funds to enforce this or to at least comply with this. And it's sometimes, and we'll show that later on, return on investment is very difficult to show when you're talking about prevention. But I'm just really more than thrilled. I'm relieved that 76% want to do right by their people, and that shows they're good companies trying to do the right thing for this. But again, compliance with that legislation, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you could be a proponent and asking for these measures for years, and now you have a legal compliant that now you can navigate the bureaucracy of your company and say, see what I told you? This is legal requirement now. Anything to leverage this. And that's why we were thrilled. Many of our clients, most of them, value their people. But when we saw this legislation and different forms of legislation across the country, it really can help you leverage that with the other competing interests for budgetary implementation of the program, even though it's a low cost, as I'll explain.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, Matt, that response to a past or recent incident, right? We have 11% of people on this call have been in work situations where they've had firsthand experience with some act of workplace violence. So it's more prevalent, I think, and requires that prevention versus a response, but definitely tightening up and focusing
Yeah.
on how do we keep this from happening again in our workplace.
Yeah, Lisa, I was remiss in that. That's extremely important. I guarantee you, those 11%, they see what it can do to the morale, to the psychological impact of it, the reputational damage, but really it can be devastating to a company's operations. And again, the most important asset. So I guarantee you, those 11%, they could have some stories to tell with us on how it impacted. I can't think of, my guess is not one of them wouldn't say it didn't impact the workplace.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we'll go. Um, the power of proactive prevention. There's a lot of great work being done. The Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, the shop that I ran for many years and helped get it stood up, along with many others. But the FBI, if people take a note of this, the FBI really has a seminal work called Making Prevention a Reality. We have a very close relationship with the behavioral unit down in Quantico, Virginia, not too far from where I reside. And we meet with them regularly and review their after action reports. But they came out with a report, a really good guide in 2019 that was peer reviewed by experts from all different disciplines. But really, making prevention a reality, take a note of that. For those of you who are interested, it really does create some really seminal thought leadership. Um, Again, this is not a Sikich invention. We we integrated all the best practices and have been doing this for a living. We're not a training vendor. We're not necessarily we're not strictly related to policies, but we put all of these best practices together, and that's just one of the many documents that we have cited many times and used as a resource. So I talked about return on investment, and if I could, we had a termination case about 2 years ago where I was called by a company. We had no interaction with them, and we have tactical resources. We followed people after being terminated. We've conducted surveillance. We've had people stationed in a reception area after a concerning situation, but we got called by a company we had no interaction with prior to this phone call on a Tuesday, and they wanted to fire somebody on a Friday. And for those of you in my HR world out there, I think you'd all collectively shake your head. Never be in a hurry to fire somebody until you've done your homework first. Again, look at Henry Pratt. But they called us and they said, hey, we want to fire somebody on a Friday. And our first question in threat assessment training is, why are you firing? And they said, well, he's had anger management issues and we heard he's bipolar. Now, you should be appalled at that, the American Disabilities Act, the fact that since when has mental health been a violation of any policy? The vast majority of our friends, family, and loved ones who happen to suffer from mental health are law-abiding citizens. But nonetheless, we set up we set up a severance package that's a best practice when you have a concerning termination. And we had that person followed after the termination, making a long story short, but we had him followed to the gun store. And think about it, he was fired. It's not illegal to be fired. It's not illegal to have anger management issues. Certainly not illegal to be bipolar, according to the American Disabilities Act, and all of us agree on that. But it was a very, very touchy relationship. We contacted the person's wife. I assisted her in getting a court-ordered mental health treatment. It made the national news. 2 state police departments were involved. And she said it best. She goes, my husband, I love him very much. He was off his medication. And then a few invectives after that, because she was really pretty ticked off at the employer. But even though nobody got hurt, they found a list of people he didn't like. We had to provide executive protection for people he didn't like at his workstation that we found the list. They had to close factories. It was a pretty large manufacturing company. And it cost them, within just a few days, about $500,000. Nobody got hurt. We were very grateful. But I was on the phone with the CEO a few days later, and he said, Matt, I'm very grateful nobody got hurt, but I'm really concerned. People don't want to go back to work. Morale's been affected. They think we've totally mistreated this 10-year employee who up until recently got good evaluations. And he said, people are afraid to go back to work. The reputational damage can't be undone. We had to put together a crisis communications plan that Sikich does very effectively. But again, look at the investment. And for a very low cost, I told him, the CEO, if you had had a workplace violence prevention program, policy, training that are relatively way less than the impact of an event, you would have been much more tuned to prevent this, recognizing those concerning behaviors. The founder of Easy, a person named Stelios Hagiano, if you think safety is expensive, try an accident. And we just love that tagline. It's such good advice. So the power of prevention, just in direct costs and indirect costs, and our personal experience bears that out. But Starbucks, for instance, after an increase in customer aggression, they implemented a de-escalation training program in 2022. They reported a measurable decline in incident-related costs across high-risk locations and improved employee confidence in handling volatile situations. We're equipping our best, most important asset, the eyes and ears of your company or your people. Kroger's, after implementing a comprehensive workplace violence prevention training program, they reported a decline in violent incidents across its stores, leading to lower security-related costs and fewer liability claims. And I, for one, any of you that frequent Starbucks or Kroger, you should have a little more peace of mind that they have these programs in place. So we're just curious. Lisa and I and our team are very curious. What do you think the biggest cost of an incident would be for your team? Feel free to pop that in the chat. Love to share it with our colleagues on the line. Do we have any responses, Lisa? I think you're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting some answers. We have
Oh,
kind of a
good.
two-step process to get the chat over. Yeah. So lives, productivity. Um, Again, largest cost would be any lost lives, or any lives impacted. So it seems like there's really a kind of that human-centered cost is what continues to drive the decision making and motivation around what we're seeing with our attendees. Legal expense, we, as you outlined, it's really expensive to have to mitigate or have an incident response versus a proactive plan. um, so yeah, that it seems.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And look at the impact on these low cost, high impact efforts of creating these workplace violence prevention policies, programs, the accompanying training, and being prepared to work concerning cases. McDonald's franchises in Chicago, as an example, saw a 25% decrease in employee turnover after implementing workplace safety training. The staff cited improved confidence in managing these risks. Uh, as a key factor in the decision to stay. So retaining quality employees, look at this ever-changing job market and how that impacted Walmart. In 2019, they introduced active shooter preparedness. The company was widely praised in the media for its proactive support and approach to this, and reinforced customer trust, boosting employee morale. Target, the same thing. After implementing their training, they observed improved customer satisfaction scores and a positive public perception to its commitment to safety. There's your return on investment, just citing these. So really, the benefits of a strong culture is just critical. Um, Better employee retention and a strong organizational culture is the cornerstone of a successful business. So you have a persuasive argument that we've done as we have gained interest from potential clients and really developed a long-term relationship with them. It helps you stay focused on your mission. It makes it easier to recruit new employees, keeps them engaged over time. This structure can also improve efficiency by encouraging more of a collaboration among teams and reducing bureaucracy. So what does it look like? As we look at what a prevention program looks like after this slide, it really is, prevention is culture building. You're talking about training and awareness, you're talking about reporting. These are the key components of a comprehensive workplace violence program. And we'll discuss in greater detail session 3. I hope you join us and invite your colleagues. The more the merrier. But we'll be getting into a lot of detail on this in tomorrow's session 3. So back to our original poll question. Um, how many do you have in here? And type your number in the chat. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. Does your organization have these things in place?
And I think not knowing what your organization has in place is also a really key factor here. If you don't know if this is something that the organization has, and it bears a conversation with your HR team and your safety team and your leadership teams, to really illuminate the fact that this is something there needs to be some intentionality around.
Uh, Absolutely, Lisa, and we'll talk about it in more detail on session 3. But I can't tell you the number of times we've asked our new clients, give us all your workplace violence prevention related policies, and there's this one sentence epiphany in the employee handbook that workplace violence won't be tolerated. Well, that is not a written plan, and even though some people think it is, and do they have a team, their reporting process, annual training? So stay tuned for session 3, and we'll talk a lot more in detail about that.
Okay, we've come to our third and final poll question. This is going to be a question more for our internal team here, so feel free. If you're interested in exploring how we can support your organization with workplace violence, meaning the Sikich Workforce Risk Management Team, go ahead and throw your interest there in the poll question. This does count. This is like the freebie, the free space on a bingo card here. This is for our kind of internal reference and knowledge here. And this is a good time for us, I think, to go over some, again, since the poll question and participation is paramount to getting full credit for your CPEs. Just a reminder that as we wrap up here, that there will be a survey after the session. We're going to take a couple of minutes for Q&A here with Matt. So go ahead, throw your questions, in the chat or in the question section for us, and our team will help get those over to us for Matt to have some more commentary on. And we have one that has come up already. So we'll go ahead and transition to the one that we have right now. So Matt, a question from the attendees here is, how should a company address potential violence against the remote worker, either at home, during a walk, with children at a playground, etc.? Unless, is this just a matter for the police? What should a company do to help support remote
Well,
employees in situations?
yeah, there are when we teach workplace violence prevention training, we include that ever increasing demographic of a remote worker. Virtual backgrounds. If you're going to counsel somebody, performance improvement, we encourage people to have their videos on so you can look at those concerning behaviors. If somebody with frequency and intensity, you hear yelling in the background, people aren't grooming themselves as they often as they used to, those types of things, and we teach that for the remote. That same question with our California OSHA clients came up, and California recognized that if you require, just as a sidebar, if California, if the job description, um, if the person is voluntarily working remote, they're not necessarily covered by California OSHA. But if the job description includes a remote employee by job description, then California OSHA, the employer, is required to give them some cover. So there are best practices on virtually how to recognize that, and look at the training that takes place. When you train all of your employees, short, cost effective, they can be on the lookout for concerning behaviors too for that person, and to encourage this reporting. And as we talk about in session three, it's not a punitive exercise. So there are best practices for remote, and we hope to talk in more detail about them.
Great. Thanks, Matt. We'll give just another minute for our team to get any additional questions over to us from today's session. While we're given another minute or two for questions to come in, Matt's mentioned several times today, immediately following this session is session 2 of 4 in this series, and that is the impact of domestic violence in the workplace. So that is going to be, we have a domestic violence expert coming in, and Matt's going to be facilitating that session. So we hope that you're registered for that. Most people registered for the full series, so you should have that invite and the link to that. That is a separate link, so don't hang on the line here, because this call is going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes. So make sure that you jump over to session 2. Also, if you haven't already registered, we have 2 more sessions in our series tomorrow. So we have session 3, which is building a best practice workplace violence prevention plan and the 8 critical steps to success in that. So that is a very tactical session, and there's still time to register for that. And then we also have session 4, that's going to be coming up tomorrow, immediately following session 3. So we're trying to keep everything kind of compact and in one place for you. And that really is around the idea of how do you turn people from bystanders to upstanders. So how do you support a culture of early reporting? Matt talked about the pathways of violence and how important it is to really, have everyone feel safe and informed and know how to report concerns before they turn into incidents, and really stay ahead of that risk there. So there's still time to register for the remaining sessions in this series. So we hope that you will do that. Matt, it looks like that was the primary question that came in from our attendees today. So
Great.
any final thoughts on today's session on the 101 side of things?
No, and the end game of what we're trying to get to, we get calls. We have our fingers crossed on Fridays in our operations team, because oftentimes these cases come to our attention, as HR can relate to, where they should have been known sooner, but they had an uneducated workforce, didn't report the warning signs, thought it was a punitive exercise. I don't want to get involved to get somebody in trouble, or this will reflect badly on me. And we'll talk about in session 3 how to avoid these things, how having a safe psychological safety we're going to talk about. How do you create that environment where people don't think workplace violence prevention programs are a punitive exercise? We encourage people to come forward And that's what you want in a high performing office anyway. So very excited to be here. It's a passion of ours. We truly feel like it's a public service that we provide to all of our clients, and nothing's more rewarding than getting people in a safer place. So stay tuned for the other sessions as we get there to really, I hope you find this information of value. I know our team does as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for those closing thoughts here. Again, just a couple of housekeeping items. You had your chance to participate in the poll. The next thing you need to do is when we wrap this session up, stick around, complete the survey. That will check all the boxes in order for you to get your CPU credits. If that's part of why you were joining us today. Again, our team is here to be a resource for you. You can find our team information at the sikich.com website under Workforce Risk Management. We're happy to follow up with any additional questions that you might have after the session. You'll be receiving some follow-up information on how we can make that really easy to answer those questions or work with your team. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you all for attending today. Again, I think you all deserve extra credit for dedicating time on a Monday to being thoughtful and intentional about learning how to best protect your workforce and create a safer, more resilient workplace for your employees and your communities. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up the session. We hope to see you in session 2 starting just a few minutes from now. So if you're registered for that, we'll be back online with you here shortly. Thank you so much.